Hey traders, welcome back to the weekly Forex Forecast. Last week we saw the dollar pushing higher and we are now making our way towards the major breakout we've been tracking in these videos at the 107.35. It does look like we may need more than 1 week to get there because there's only usually a 3 out of 10 chance of moving significantly above or below these upper and lower bounds that we display in the weekly Forex Forecast video for you guys in each asset. So my view is we're probably going to kind of consolidate, push high into the prior high and the 106.60. And that may be pretty much the move for next week. Maybe we need 2 to 3 weeks to actually break the major high of the 107.35. But it does look like it's coming. And heading into this week, US dollar long plays are one of the top themes that I'm going to be looking at in today's video, alongside Australian dollar longs. And I'm going to talk to you in today's video about why I still like Swiss franc long plays this week, despite the interest rate cut we saw from the S&P last week. Okay, so looking at the market selection heading into next week, we can see the Aussie and the franc and the US dollar are sitting in the 1, 2, and 3 slots. So this actually sets up a very nice, clean-cut, bullish theme in Aussie, bullish theme in Swiss franc, bullish theme in the US dollar. And last week we did have a couple of interest rate decisions, starting with Australia. The RBA held, and this of course is supportive for the Australian dollar. And heading into this week, I do like, once again, any opportunities that set up or allow me to buy the Australian dollar, especially against some of these weak currencies, as we'll go through in the video today. But I want to be looking for those bullish opportunities in the Aussie, and that interest rate hold last week was supportive of that. Now, we also had, of course, the US dollar, and we had the FOMC holding interest rates as well. So setting up this kind of divergence between, the US, Australia, and also Europe, which is cutting, Canada, which is cutting, etc. But we had a couple of other interest rate decisions last week. Switzerland cut interest rates by 25 basis points. So going into this week, you might think, well, is this something we want to be looking at to the short side? However, there's another driver behind this Swiss franc strength, and that is the calling of the elections in France and the instability, which markets don't like. Markets like stability. And so that driver remains unresolved and will be unresolved until there's an election. For the time being, we are still seeing flows coming out of the euro into the Swiss franc. And that is why going into this week, despite the cut from the S&P, and we did see weakness in the Swiss franc, I do still favor Swiss franc longs. And quantitatively speaking, we should still be looking for outperformance in the Swiss franc relative to some of the weaker currencies. Now, the other thing from last week was the Bank of England. We did have the Bank of England coming out and they held interest rates, but we saw the pound sell off. Why? Because it was reported as a dovish hold. In other words, they said we're holding interest rates now, but it was a finely balanced decision between at least 3 of the voting members, and therefore, this signals to the market that actually, despite the fact they held, going forwards on a forward-looking basis, they're going to start to cut probably pretty soon, based on the fact that a number of members were considering it at this meeting but decided against it and decided to vote for a hold. So there's a good bearish driver coming into this week for the pound. It has also moved now out of the positive side and it's making its way down into the negative side. So we've got momentum to the downside. So in terms of shorts this week, I favor euro shorts based on what we've just discussed, with the flows coming out of the euro due to the upcoming elections, and also Canadian dollar shorts, and also pound shorts. And I do think we're going to see continued pound weakness based on the dovish hold that we saw and the fact that a number of members were considering voting for a cut. Now, to the downside, the only other market here is the Japanese yen. And again, we've actually started to see the rate of change on Japanese yen weakness pick up. And when you start to get that rate of change picking up, in other words, not just the Japanese yen selling off, but the Japanese yen starts to sell off at a faster and faster rate, this is when you get intervention. So I do think we're firmly back into the realm of potential intervention in the yen, and I still don't want to be on the wrong side of that. So Japanese yen shorts are still off the table for me on a short-term basis because of that risk of intervention from the Ministry of Finance. So to cut a long story short, coming into this week, I do like EurUsd to the downside. We're going to be looking at Euro franc to the downside still, and also Euro dollar to the downside. We're going to look at AudCad We're going to look at CAD franc and US dollar CAD to the upside, and also pound Aussie to the downside, pound franc to the downside, and primarily pound dollar to the downside as well. Those are the primary Forex markets that are on my watch list for trading opportunities coming into this week. Okay, so kicking off the watch list with crude oil, and we look at crude oil every single week. Crude oil is now making its way to the upside. We did have quite a strong reversal, and on balance, although it's sort of a neutral market, I do favor long positions only. So I can either buy this or do nothing next week. What I'll be looking for is, I'll be looking for a pullback, a breach of the 78.58, and if we breach this level, we only have a 3 out of 10 chance of continuing lower down towards the second lower bound here. And another way of looking at that is we have a 70% chance roughly of pausing or reversing higher for 1 or 2 days in this market. So if we get that, I'm going to be looking at 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside, buying crude oil. And you can also look for intra-week stuff if it breaks out on a breakout. So you've got two things we're looking at here. We're looking at buying potentially on a pullback, or if it breaks out before taking out the lower bound, you can look for those bull flags in the 4 hours. Very often, if you do get this, you get 1 or 2 bull flag or bear flag setups in a week in the 4-hour chart. Usually you only get 1. So those are the two options we'll be looking at. If we breach the 78.58 and we continue lower, so let's say I step in, and these are the setups that I do in real time with members during the week, and we're currently up to over 30 setups now without taking a loss, although last week was more difficult because of the Juneteenth holiday in the US in the middle of the week, right on Wednesday. It made last week a little bit difficult to trade. But for those following along in previous videos, the win streak has continued, although it was a little bit more difficult last week than in prior weeks. So if we breach this, if I step in here and we breach this level and we sell off down to the 76.20, this is the second place you can look for a 1 or 2 day reversal, and actually you have roughly a 95% chance of pausing or reversing if you breach this level down here. And for those who want to follow along, as I do this in real time throughout the week, look for these day trades and these swing trades from these upper and lower bounds in the members area. You can find all the information on that in the description below this video. Okay, so let's run through the Forex markets I'm looking at and are top of my watch list heading into next week. The first is EurAusd. This is my favorite Forex pair heading into next week. I can either sell this or do nothing. I cannot buy this market. So what I want to see is I want to see this market pull back. I want to see it breach the 1.62490, take out this high, that would be great. And then I'm going to be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. If it blasts through here, and I might already be short with a position here, if it blasts through here and takes out the 1.6398, this is going to be a second place to look for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. Again, if you're not already involved, this is a great area to get involved with longs or shorts for 1 or 2 day reversals, but they don't reach these levels very often. You know, usually maybe 5% of the time, 10% of the time. So most of the time you'll start to see these reversals take place between these two levels, you know, once you've breached the upper and lower bound in the blue here, or the first upper and lower bound. So that's what I'd like to see heading into next week. And again, as always, if we fail to get there, if this really shows weakness and we start to break out like this before we get there, then any kind of breakout and bear flag setup can also be looked at into the 1.59518. Next is Euro franc. Again, I can either short this or do nothing. And we did see a little bit of profit taking come in from the SNB decision last week. So I'd like to see this pull back even more. I'd like to see this breach the 0.9650, especially if we can take out this high. Then you've got a market which is overbought, a weak market which is overbought on the week, and it's trading into prior resistance. This would be a great place to look for that 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside in Euro franc. If we blast all the way through and we take out the 0.97390, which isn't likely because most of the time we don't, but if we do, this would be the second place I'll be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal, and potentially even a cost average if that initial position moves against me. And as always, if you get that kind of bear flag breakout, so you see real weakness, it doesn't even make it all the way back here, but you sell off, you pull back, you can look for that 4-hour bear flag into the prior low and below the 0.94719. This would be a great profit taking opportunity next week below this lower bound. Next is euro dollar. Again, I can either short this market or do nothing next week. I can only look for short positions. So what I'd like to see is I'd like to see this market pull back. Preferably if we can breach the 1.0793, this is where the odds start to turn into our favor for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. If we break through here, I mean, if we test this deep and we test this high, this would be a great place where we're overbought on the week and we're trading into resistance, that would be a good place, to time that if it blasts through and tests this high. But if it continues all the way up to the 1.0896, this would be the second place I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside in this market. And as always, if it fails to pull back and take out the upper bound and just starts to break down intra-week, you can look for that kind of bear flag setup should it appear down to the 1.05881. Again, we have that kind of bearish driver in this market fundamentally now, where Europe is cutting rates, where we have elections coming up in Europe, and at the same time in the US, we kind of have that higher for longer still going on with the recent holding of interest rates. So euro dollar to the downside, I do think is a very good market heading into next week. Next is AuCad. I can either be a buyer of this market or do nothing. We are lacking a bit of momentum. You can see we're taking out the highs and we keep failing. So we're sort of in a range. I mean, you see we break this high and we're struggling to break this high over here, and we're kind of pulling back below it, and we're kind of retesting these highs on the downside. So we sort of have a bit of a range going on, probably you could say between here and maybe down here. So if it comes down, breaches the 0.90247 and takes out these lows, that's going to be a good place. I'll be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside in this market. If it breaks all the way through, and I may be already involved and on the wrong side of this, and it takes out the 0.8955, this would be the second place I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside in AuCad. And as always, this breaks out intra-week. If we fail to get there and it just blasts higher and you get momentum and a pullback, you can look, for those of you who like the intra-week stuff, you can look for that bull flag into the 0.9163 and probably this high as well. If it does that, it'll probably take out the prior high. Next is CAD franc. Now I can only be a seller of this. I cannot buy this market next week. So if it pulls back and we test the upper bound, this is what I'd really like to see, a breach of the upper bound at the 0.6579. And these upper and lower bounds are all automatically generated by the Hedge Dash platform. That's what we're actually looking at here. And these are added on every day, every week, every month. And what it's telling you is that this asset this week has roughly a 70% chance of trading between these levels. So if we breach the 0.65790, this is going to be a great place, especially if we retest the prior low here, to start to look for that 1 or 2 day reversal back inside this range. And if we blast through it and we take out the 0.66299, this is the second place next week. I'll be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal in this market. And if instead of pulling all the way back, we've got a very weak market and we don't get that pullback, which I like to see, which I'm looking for. If we break out intra-week like this before taking out the upper bound, you can look to see if you get that bear flag set up in the 4-hour chart down to the 0.6480. Next is US dollar CAD. I can only buy this or do nothing. I cannot short it. And you can see we're in a big consolidation. We have prior lows down here. There's one, and they're sitting right at the lower bound. And you can see really this is just stuck in a range. So essentially this is just a big range trade, technically speaking. And any kind of pullback into this area, I want to see it break the 1.3605. Take out these lows. This low would be even better. And this would be an area I'd be looking for momentum to slow once we start to become oversold. And I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside. If we blast through here for whatever reason, doesn't usually happen without a catalyst, but if we do come down to the 1.3518, this would be the second place I'd look for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the upside, and maybe even just to risk manage, an initial losing position. But if we break out before we test the lower bound, you always have, a couple of options here. If it starts to break out and you get momentum like this, you can look for that bull flag setup. Doesn't mean you'll always get it, but if you start to break out without testing these levels, you can at least look for that kind of bull flag setup with the follow through in the 4-hour chart. Next is Pound Aussie. Now I really like this setup. You've got this kind of head and shoulders breakout over here, you can see. And this has kick-started this momentum to the downside. And of course, this was from that dovish hold that we saw. And the Aussie is sitting strong as one of the best long themes heading into next week. So I really like Pound Aussie to the downside. I think this is set for further declines. And what I would like to see is if we can pull back and we become overbought on the week above the 1.91879, this is where I'd be looking for reversal patterns for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. If we blast through here, take out the 1.93388 and this high, and again, maybe I'm already short, maybe I'm not, but if we get to this area, this would be a second place I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal. And as always, you can see, especially if we come back, maybe we just tag the head and shoulders low over here, the breakout area. If it does that and then breaks lower, you can look for that bear flag setup in the 4 hours down to the 1.8886. And below here, this is where I would be looking at booking profits on any kind of intra-week opportunities, because we start to run out of road once we trade below the 1.8886 next week. Next is pound franc. Now this also looks like a nice setup. You can see big sell-off, consolidation, big sell-off. We're starting to consolidate. So I'd like to see this market pull back next week. Trade above the 1.14018. This means an opportunity that I'm looking to be short in this market, because it's a bearish market, has now appeared. Why? Because it's become overbought. So it's a market I'm looking to short, it's become overbought. And I'll be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside in this market. If we blast through here and we take out the 1.1496 as always, this would be the second place I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. Whether I'm already short and risk managing it, or whether this is a new opportunity. You know, I'm not short here and this happens, maybe I haven't taken this because of whatever reason, and it trades into the second upper bound, I get that initial position. And the final thing you can look for as always is maybe we come back and we just test the prior low, you know, this kind of breakout stair step, and you get that momentum to the downside. You can look for the bear flag setup into the prior low and the 1.1212. And the final pound pair we're looking at is pound dollar. I can only sell it or do nothing. I cannot buy this market. And I do think pound short themes, you know, that theme of pound short heading into next week is really going to be one of the best things to look at in the Forex complex after that meeting last week. You can see we've already started to break down. We actually have downward sloping kind of head and shoulders. We've already broken it. Now, what I'd really like to see is I'd like to see an attempt at buying into this, pushing this market above the 1.27511. This is going to be a great place to look for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. Should we blast through this for whatever reason, even though it's unexpected and we take out the prior high here, this would be the second place I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside. However, it may be the case because we've already broken this, you know, we start to pull back, we fail to reach the upper bound. Hopefully we take it out because I prefer these upper and lower bounds. That's really where the high probability opportunities are. But if you break down intra-week, you can also look for those bear flag setups into the 1.25379. So I really like pound shorts as a theme heading into next week. And just to wrap up the Forex complex with a couple of additional bonus charts, we'll look at New Zealand franc and New Zealand dollar. I do think probably you can look at two good opportunities to the downside next week. So I can short this or do nothing. What I really want to see is a breach of the 0.55249, and this would be where I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal, especially if we breach this and take out this high. That would be great. If we blast through here and take out the 0.5579, that would be the second place I'd be looking for a short. And as always, if you break out intra-week, there's nothing wrong with looking for those kind of bear flag setups into the prior low down here and below the 0.5415. Wrapping up the Forex market then with New Zealand dollar, you can see it's kind of consolidating. So I like the other dollar pairs better, but if we do take out the 0.61894, this is a place you could look for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside next week. If we breach this, you know, you can see we'd be making new highs into the 0.62630. I would still consider, especially if I was already short, I would have to do this, shorting once again at the 0.6260. And as always, if you start to break out intra-week, you know, you just kind of move sideways like this and then you break down, you can look for that pullback, perhaps a retest of these lows and that sell-off into the 0.60476. Once we start to trade below here, the chances are that we don't go much further. So this would be a good profit-taking opportunity below this level next week. Wrapping up the video with gold and silver, because of my bullish bias in the dollar, and I do think we're going to be taking out that upper bound and we're probably heading up to that major breakout level, I favor short positions in gold and silver. But silver is actually one of the best performing commodities. So silver next week isn't a fantastic opportunity in my opinion. It is a market that I cover every single week, so we are going to review it. But on balance, I prefer gold shorts next week rather than silver shorts. So any pullback in this market, I'm going to be looking for a breach of the 2417.76. Especially if we breach this and take out this high, this is going to be a great place to look for a 1 or 2 day reversal to the downside in gold. If we blast through here and we take out the 2514, as always, I'll be looking for a potential second opportunity for a 1 or 2 day reversal. And if we fail to take out the upper bound and we just kind of pull back, and you can see the volatility for next week is expected actually to be fairly high. Not sure exactly the reason why, but that is what the data is saying. So if we pull back and we start to break out intra-week, you can look for that bear flag setup into 2225.25, and this would be a great profit-taking opportunity for any intra-week gold shorts next week. Wrapping up the video with silver, I do favor shorts in silver on balance because of that bias in the dollar, that bullish bias. Now, the problem with silver is out of all of the commodities that I would short, this would probably be the least because it is one of the best performers, and I would prefer to short the weaker stuff than short the stronger stuff. So, and if you think about it like this, you know, all commodities could be selling off as the dollar rallies, but some are going to sell off more than others. So I do think silver shorts are not as good as gold shorts heading into next week, but on balance, any pullback in silver above the 30.65, especially if we take out this high, I would, if you are looking to trade it, look for a potential short for 1 or 2 day reversal. If we blast through here and take out the second upper bound at the 31.72 and we start to take out these highs, this would be the second place I'd be looking for a 1 or 2 day reversal. And if we break out intra-week, you can look for that bear flag sell-off, although highly, highly unlikely. In fact, I'm almost certainly not going to be trading any bear flags in this because it is still, as I said, one of the stronger commodities. So I favor shorts on balance because of that dollar bullish bias, but I would prefer gold to the short side next week. So that is it from me for today, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, why not consider joining us in the GMT training room each day where I look at the best markets as well as sharing real-time setups that I'm personally looking at trading with members as part of our GMT training program. Don't forget, you can also get a 2-week free trial to the cutting-edge Hedge-trading app used in today's video by heading over to www.hedge-.com.